Oh, thank you, Maria. I'm going to say this, Dov, and I'm pretty sure you'll agree with me. I think the logging capability within GitLab for customers' applications is owned by the APM team. So they should be the primary driver. And what I don't want to do is slow down their efforts and the things that they need to accomplish in order to increase the scope. I think it's probably fair to say, Victor's not on the call, but Daniel, that the improvements that you're talking about around logs are not as a high a priority for your teams as the other improvements that Dov and the APM team are working on. And if that's the case, I just want to, one thing that's not a good success pattern at GitLab is if we try to bundle everybody's work together and build a bunch of dependencies. So I want to make sure we're assigning the primary ownership of this is on Dov's team. They're going to be the drivers. They have, I understand, the highest priority. The other teams can consume that work, but I don't want it to end up, I don't want it to end up being like us bundling a bunch of stuff together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense for my.
Yeah, totally.
The other question I will ask about the research is, Dov, the fact that you're in the APM, the research task that is linked here is about validating the maturity level when we plan to move it to viable. I don't know how heavy a lift that is from a UX research perspective, or you would expect it to be from, are you doing this to understand the users, or is this the pure maturity level verification effort?
Yeah, so to understand the user as Maria mentioned, Amelia already did user research. I think even before I joined, I remember that I was going through that user research, which was pretty good. So we have a good understanding of what users need in terms of monitoring for logs. That specific issue you mentioned, research issue you mentioned, I think Andre also can shed some light because he's running this research. It's more about validating the user experience and not the user needs for the logs. Thanks, Carl.
Yes, it will be more. This particular one will be part of our OKRs, and we will be making sure that the maturity that is assigned to this particular category is not only assigned by us, subjectively, that the designer assigned it, but it's also, there is some feedback from users, and it matches, or does it make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So it will be more of a validation of the stage is relevant, or it's right.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that process is not, as far as I understand, super well defined, but maybe we can go around to the other groups, and Victor's not here to represent Knita, but Daniel, if you can talk about any user research that you were interested in and how users interact with logs for the items listed for you.
Yeah, so really the only piece that we did here was to research the user for pod logs, and we kind of had a good idea of who was looking at those logs. And that's kind of the extent of the research that we've done when it comes to logs. One thing that I'm not fully familiar with how it works today is how users are accessing the Elastic logs today. But I could imagine that it's probably not from the same place where they access pod logs today. So something that's unified, I think, would be nice, just like with operations and monitoring or metrics. Something like that for logs, I think, would be nice. Yeah, so sorry, I don't have a lot to contribute.
So when you say, so Daniel, when you say the Elastic log, what Elastic are you referring to? The Elastic that is in GitLab? Or Elastic that they run?
I would imagine, no, the one that is installed in cluster that is aggregating the logs for my application as it's running, right? So I think that GitLab maintainers or GitLab admins will probably want to see logs for GitLab Elastic, But if I'm a software team, if I'm a software developer, and I put Elastic in my cluster, I would imagine that it's aggregating all the logs for how my app is running. And when I encounter a problem or I want to research an issue, I probably want kind of a centralized place to look at all of the things have to do with logging. And I think that pod logs right now, it's kind of the only clear example that we have. I don't know where the Elastic logs are being surfaced in GitLab, if at all. So I'm just saying it would be nice, since all of those things have to do with how my app is running, to have them in a centralized place.
Yes. So actually today, what you're referring to is exactly what we will have in 12.8. We in 12.8, it's already on .com, by the way. If you have a .com instance running somewhere, you can go to the Kubernetes integration and you can install the Elastic Stack. And if you go to, I just tested, by the way. And if you go to the log explorer, the logs that you see there are the aggregated logs from Elasticsearch. So you can search, you can do like a full text search, and you can do like the time range. So we just released that. So it's just there, and this is exactly what we are aiming. This is exactly what we are targeting. And
but so
go ahead.
One key thing, you use the word log explorer. It's the same link to pod logs, same view. So Daniel, you said you wanted them unified. They are unified. It uses the exact same interface.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, that's exactly the same interface. Actually, I have it open. If you want to see it, I can show it to you. But yeah, I mean, this is exactly what we are working on today, and we have a pretty good understanding of what are the next features that we would like to put inside to add to that view, to the centralized view. And we will also want to combine that with the ability, because right now, as you mentioned, we are aiming for the developers only. So we are just exposing the logs of the apps. But what about the GitLab managed app? Not only Elasticsearch, Prometheus, or maybe things that we install for security. So all of those need to be exposed as well. And this is actually a separate project, and even potentially a separate place where we will add like another log explorer. It will look the same, probably share the same code base, but in the cluster admin view or something else. And those are the things that we are talking about in terms of what are the next things that we are going to do.
Yeah, and that was one of my, so I will be so bold as to say, without Victor here, that I don't think the central log collection for Knative functions is on his highest priorities. Maybe that's totally off base, but I know that the team is focusing on infrastructure as code recently. The one that was of particular interest to me was this one in configure orchestration that's exposed GitLab managed apps in pod logs. I would contend that that is really only a priority if it's a priority for you, Dov, because I want to make sure we're focused on that overall log explorer experience first, and that is good for the applications pod logs before we then move to the GitLab managed apps pod logs. Especially given, Daniel, that we have the job log from when you actually run any change to the cluster. That's gonna be the primary point where you would see where you would encounter some sort of an error.
Yeah, I have to say that it is not our main priority for now. We can start thinking about a design issue on where will it look and what should we expose. I think this is definitely something that we can talk. But in terms of the actual implementation and the actual engineering work, this is something that we're likely to take after version 13, maybe 13.1 or even more.
Okay.
If I can chip in here, that was the reason I started this conversation. It's good to have the research way before even the designers have started thinking about designing, which is far ahead from the implementation milestone. So this is why I started this conversation now.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I guess the research issue to suggest that logging is viable, I imagine, is going to generate a lot of new things for us to do to polish that experience. Like it's a little bit strange to call it viable because it's kind of like the new MVC for this Pod Explorer experience, although we've had that pod or the log trailing thing for a while. When I think about, Dov, your team's efforts around logging, I don't know if it's gonna, I imagine, like you said, the next 3 to 4 iterations are gonna be about responding to the research issue that is this actually viable, not doing net new feature work like the managed apps Explorer.
Even before that, we still have some gaps on, you know, what we originally planned to release and what we release is it's like an MVC. We are still missing some critical parts in order to leverage the full capabilities of the Elasticsearch or the Elastic Stack. And so even before the research issue, we still have some additional issues that I would like us to implement.
You mentioned 2 points in the issue about the logs, about the way of presenting the logs, and another point, sorry for the noise. Is that going to be part of the research for the viable log experience? Or
I don't remember the actual, I need to read through. I remember that I had, something that I really wanted to understand from the research is, I remember, does our customers' interest is on structured log or unstructured log? And this is, I think, there isn't a right or wrong answer because there are pros and cons for both approach. But I really wanted to understand what's the take from our users. And an answer could be from our users, they don't care. Okay, maybe that's also a viable answer. But this is really something that I'm not sure we can actually do something if they will say we want this over the other, at least not immediately. But it will be good to understand because from things that I'm reading on observability and logging specifically, this is something that there is like huge debate between like the pro Elasticsearch that would like structured log and the pro log Grafana Loki, which is like a different product, that it is like an unstructured log. And as I mentioned, there are pros and cons for both. I can elaborate more if needed. But this is something that I would really like to understand from the research.
And you also mentioned
the second comment, I don't remember, what was it?
How to navigate into the logs UI. Or maybe how they would like to navigate into logs directly from an incident, from metrics, or just not.
Yeah. This is actually related a bit for our triage flow, and I think it's really interesting to understand how users are navigating today to logs, because today most users actually just jump into the logs probably directly, even not from incident. I mean, unless they have like a consolidate solution. Today, the most common solution for logs is Elasticsearch. And if they are using metrics with Grafana or Datadog or any other tool, they probably are moving between two screens. But I really wanted to better understand if they are reacting to an incident and either go directly to the logs, or maybe they just jump with the logs and start asking questions, basically asking question on the log explorer on the log UI and start searching to the logs. This is something that I also like to understand. What is the preferred way to go from metrics, to go from incident, or to go directly from logs? So there are
or maybe all of the above.
Probably all of the above also, but I want to understand what's their preferred way, or what's the most common way for doing that.
I think that ties in well with if there are different types of logs, so from managed apps, from the cluster, for which type of logs is the best navigation design, if that makes sense.
It's also depend, because it depends if we support that. I mean, if they are navigating from, let's say, give out from a metrics chart, we don't monitor the GitLab Manage app, for instance, at least not out of the box. And they probably won't be able to do this. They aren't able to do it today until we will have this capability. But it really depends if it's possible for us to do it. So I guess the question is, how would you like to move, to navigate to the logs? And how do you do it today? And what would be your preferred way of doing so? Again, I expect that the answer would be like drill down directly, either from a chart or from an incident. But it will be good to do like a validation for this.
So to understand, is this research project of interest or not? And we should just hold off.
So, I mean, besides those 2 points, I've gone through the list of questions, and at least for me, I kind of anticipate what would be the answer. So, I mean, in terms of is it an interest to me? It would be nice to have this as like a validation, but I'm pretty sure I know what is going to be the answer, because again, this is not something new. Okay, there are so many researches about that, and so many articles that we can learn. So besides those 2 points, at least from my side, I don't think it really like gives me any insights.
Okay, maybe I should close this issue and add, if Andre is okay with adding your 2 points in his upcoming research for viable, maybe he could fit in these learnings.
Yeah, for sure. I think at least the second point you mentioned, we can add to the viable, and discussion about the Elastic or Grafana style or type of logs. This is more for it's in my opinion, we should do different kind of research. It wouldn't be interviews, but something quantitative where we would get plenty of answers that we can make decisions. But yeah, that will help us to make decisions in the end. But we can discuss it. I will discuss it separately from this issue rather.
Okay, if there's nothing else, we'll close this issue, and Andre, you can take from it those comments.
Yeah, I will do it.
We didn't talk much about the other issue that's exposed GitLab managed apps in pod logs. Do we want to? Does that require some additional research that we could?
I believe it would, because we don't know where to surface these logs. Would it be in the same place as the rest, in a separate place?
Yeah.
Would have a logs primary navigation and then sub navigations for each managed app? How would users expect to review these logs?
Yeah, and I noticed in that issue that one of the a contributor on that issue was Sam Kerr, who is the product manager for Defend, and they are of particular interest. That is of particular interest to them because their core functionality of the WAF, the results need to be exposed in the logs and in some central place, and I think, as far as I know, they don't have a place to surface them today. I don't know if others, Daniel, Dov, if you guys have immediate use cases for exposing those managed app pod logs, but if not, that might be something that we suggest the Defend team consider carrying.
Yeah, really, that came from an internal need of, we're trying to dog food as much as possible. We came across a problem with the application firewall. Initially when we first encountered that problem, we didn't know what it was. So it would have been helpful to just see those things right on the screen. I haven't gotten any reports from external users kind of wanting that same functionality, but it may be one of those things where people are already used to going outside of GitLab to fetch those logs. you know, just because it's kind of easy to do it depending on the cloud provider that you live in, or if you use things to aggregate logs internally, which we see a lot of on-prem or self-managed customers do. But yeah, that came in internally, so that's kind of the only use case that we have.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think
and
okay, Dov.
from my side, I do consider this as like a dog fooding opportunity. So I do see value in having this as an extension of our solution. I think that the conversation mainly revolves around where are we going to expose the logs? Are we going to expose them on the same log explorer that we have today? But there are some technical challenges, especially because of the way we are deploying Elasticsearch on the cluster level, and we want to expose all the namespace and who is going to see this, because normally those logs are probably somewhat like restricted in terms of security. So I think the concern that I have from my side is that if we will, and this is what the team want to split it and put like another version of Log Explorer in the cluster admin. And then they can like change it a bit, and for the cluster admin, other users that are like maintainers can access those. My concern here is that if we will split it, then eventually we will have two separate projects, like two separate code base that we'll need to maintain. And if we'll evolve one Log Explorer, then we need to evolve another one. It will be very hard to share the same code base. So this is where the conversation is more about. You know, I think it's important. It's a good opportunity, as I mentioned, for dogfooding. But that's my concern is that.
Can I ask something? Why would they split them in the admin section rather than restricting the section visibility depending on the user?
Yeah, that's one of the technical challenges that they encounter, because right now we are deploying Elasticsearch on the cluster level. It's always hard, even for me, to explain that. So we are deploying it on the cluster level, and we are allowing the user to select the environment in one of the drop-down. Now, environment is actually a namespace. And to expose the GitLab Manage app, we need to expose the GitLab Manage namespace. And where do we do that? And how are we going to dictate which? I mean, we can find ourselves in a project that the namespace does not belong to that same project. It's in another project, although they are sharing the same cluster. So that's basically the debate. How are we going to select the namespace? And what the team offered, they said, okay, if we put it in another place, we can completely change the UI of the selectors and have, instead of environment, we'll have namespace. And that way we will solve the problem with the restriction, both with the restriction and the UI of the Log Explorer. There is an issue, I can link you to the issue about all this discussion that we had. I had a suggestion on how we can do that. And at least the engineer that I spoke with, he said that you need to think about it. It's really a hard problem. Yeah.
I still want to go, like, Dov, could I challenge that your suggestion of the way we need to improve it is more expansive than the immediate pain point, which is we need to surface WAF logs? Because the defend team could choose to surface wherever they need to the WAF logs. If Elasticsearch is installed, they can use the same design component for the Log Explorer if they need to, but they can choose to solve that specific use case however they need to. And then we can encounter or confront the managed app one when we've done the research and have had the time to pursue it. It seems like the only thing that's driving us to want to solve that today is the need to display the WAF logs. And if that's the case, we should let them go figure out a solution to do that.
Yeah, that's a solution. The only thing that I will be sorry about is the fact that we won't be able to dogfood our product.
It would be
That's
dog. I mean,
that's the only thing.
wouldn't you? It'd be dogfooding because you would have had to install that. It's just a matter of surfacing it. They would use the same design component, I would imagine, or the same structure for how to explore the logs.
No, how to export the log, it's not like the backend will be 100%. By the way, I will share the issue on the chat. So the backend, yeah, it will 100% be the same. We will share the same code base on the backend. The concern that I have is on the front, and this is where we want to get the feedback from. We want to get the feedback on, eventually want to get the feedback on the front end. We will find out, what kind of logs they want to display and surface. Okay, we'll take 1, 2, 3 iteration, we'll get the feedback, that's it. And then we'll need to start evolving the log explorer in terms of, okay, what type of filter you want to have, what type of search you want to see, and maybe visualization, and so on. Alerting, I mean, there are so many things we can work on. And that's the only concern, that if we will have like 2 separate projects, they will start drifting everyone, each for their own side. And, it will basically be not so, I would say, user-friendly, and we won't be dogfooding also our own project.
Gotcha.
Also, my concern is a user, how do they know where to go for which logs?
Mm.
And I was suggesting that we're confronting that problem in that discussion at if we expose all GitLab managed apps level. But if it was just, I'm only exposing the WAF logs, maybe there's, wherever we're currently displaying the configuration of a WAF, you can jump to a specific defend page that has the WAF logs.
Yeah, it can be like a good MVC, I think, yeah.
And what I want to make sure we're not doing is, that dialogue seems like we're suggesting we should take non-prioritized leaps in configure for exposing managed apps and the log explorer for exposing this like separate, how do we look at managed apps altogether, when the immediate pain point and driver of it seems to be the defend team who really needs to display WAF logs.
Yeah, they are the drivers, definitely.
My proposal is for vision rather than immediate. So I think it's still relevant to do research. That's my opinion. So that we can design informed.
I honestly just don't know if displaying the GitLab managed apps is a priority for any team other than the WAF team. WAF team, the defend team.
Yeah, they are the main drivers, that's for sure. I'm not sure about the rest of the team. So how do we proceed? That's the question. Should we engage the defend team and ask them if they can do that by themselves? Do we want to do like more thinking around whether we want to do that? This actually, it's funny because it's a bit coming back to the need for like a technical discussion, like a technical lead, because I think one of the challenges that we have is around the project level, cluster level, namespace. How would we expose it? That was a discussion that happened since day one, as we deployed Elasticsearch, as we plan to deploy the Elasticsearch, and I feel like that I'm missing like a detailed discussion. Maybe we have a solution. That's what I'm saying. Maybe we have a solution that we just don't see, and it can be solved through the log explorer. I mean, maybe the defend team can have, but maybe we can leverage the same capability that we have today.
I think it's worth a discussion with, I think there's strong technical lead and PMs on the defense side. Dov, I don't know if that's making sure Adrian and Lucas Charles is the technical lead on the defense side, and Sam Kerr is the PM. Just coordinating a discussion between them and the designers on the log side, and then I don't know if Defend has a designer. I think they do. But it would be good to coordinate that between them. What I did hear earlier in this conversation is that the more pressing research need is this verification of viable, and yeah, I would think that will generate a lot of future roadmap for the team, just in continuing to iterate and improve the experience of the Log Explorer as it's being shipped for the first time here this week.
Yeah, that's for sure. But as I said, we have enough features even without the research, and I anticipate that with the research we will surface even more.
Okay, cool. So I will close this issue, and I think Andre has a better idea now of the complete picture, which is good.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Sorry, and Maria, you said this was for Andre's benefit, and Andre, like, we talked a lot, and we still have time. Why don't you? Are there open questions that you have for this team?
No, not at the moment. Like for me, it was important to understand whether we are going to connect these different logs efforts together, or if we are not. And yeah, so this was solved. Otherwise, yeah, I don't think I have anything else.
Right.
Cool.
We can cut it short. Shall I post this in Unfiltered in the ops?
Yeah, great.
Okay. Cool.
Cool. Thanks for organizing this, Maria.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Have a good day.